All right, so when the lights go on and I'm not here, it's because I've gotten too chatty and he's trying to tell me something. So welcome to the Star Theater on another C Day. How are you doing? All right, that was pretty good. We won't make you do that again. They even got a little clap up there. That's pretty enthusiastic. And hopefully you all have some really cool plans for your extra day in Tahiti. And if you have anything really cool, let me know after because I have no clue what I'm going to do yet. So just a little help would be awesome. Today we're going to talk about Matisse and the Polynesian islands. And I did have someone come up to me earlier and say, I hate to correct you, but you mean Gauguin, right? And it's one of those, yes, Gauguin was there, and yes, he is famous for it, but trust me, Google agrees that Matisse was there as well. So if you weren't sure that Matisse actually was in the Polynesian islands, he was. He didn't spend as long, but it was just as influential to his later career. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And if you know me, you will know that I am not an emotional guy. I have emotions on the inside, but they do run really deep. And I love art because even for a not emotional guy, I have the ability to look at something like this and be impacted. And so I'm going to break rules. We're not really supposed to get feedback here. That's what the forums are for, which shameless plug. Day after tomorrow, we are having a forum. It is late, like 7:30, but we're going to do Gauguin and Polynesia where we can have a small group discussion really diving into his artwork. But I'm going to break rules and have you guys yell things at me. So if you're in the cabin watching, you got to yell really loud. And maybe the steward, send him up with the question. So looking at this piece of art, yell out some of the things that impact you. Color, okay? What else? Light. Lucky guy. Oh, I like that. That's from Don Winter, by the way. That's not me. What else? Style. Anything else? Movement. Yeah, I mean, it is amazing that Matisse, and this is, in the middle of his career. I should start by saying this has nothing to do with Polynesia, even though you can read into it. I mean, I had somebody I love Polynesian art because they're so attractive and it's like, no, this is not Polynesia. But you can kind of get that feel. Something else that we kind of see here is pointillism. If you know what pointillism is, it's making a picture out of small dots. This is not that. But it is kind of an homage to it in that you see these blobs, not necessarily brush strokes, but large dots. Is the water blue? Not really, sort of. Is the water, blue. Is the sky blue? No, I mean he's taking some liberty with the natural colors that we would associate with art. It's fluid. Somebody mentioned that. I mean, and yes, they are beautiful naked women, but it's this idea, the juxtaposition of lying and standing and being involved and having the boat behind while they're actually having tea. I mean, there's just a lot of activity in what is still a minimal kind of painting. So this is called Luxe comme volupté. By the way, I'm from Texas. Everyone has tried to fix my French. It just is not going to happen. So recognize that my French is horrible, but it translates luxe, luxury, calme or calm, and volupté actually is not voluptuous but pleasure. So it translates to luxury, calm, and pleasure, and I think we get that with the kind of the light blues. It gives us a feel of being calm, and he does this. roughly 35, 40 years old when he's doing this painting. So it's in the early middle of his career. And this is one of what we would call the Fauvism. It's a movement that he and two other guys did that is called the Wild Beasts, because they just were so outrageously different in the way they almost attack a canvas. So we have this juxtaposition of standing and reclining. You guys talked about color, and they're luxurious, rich colors. They're not passive colors, but they give us that richness, sensuality, and beauty, and even a bit of emotional depth. I don't keep a list, but I should start one. This is in my top 20 of all-time pictures. I mean, and there's a tremendous amount of art that we as Viking guests have the chance to see. But this one, I think, is right up there in one of my favorite, definitely one of my top two Matisse pictures. So I want to talk about his early life, just to give you some context, his rise to prominence. What is it that makes him this amazing post-impressionist kind of artist? Talk about the journey through Polynesian islands. It was short but meaningful in 1930, and then into the artistic influences that the Polynesians had on him, not only during his time there, but after, through the end of his career, and then talk a little bit about his legacy. Because Matisse just has a lot to offer, whether you like him or don't. And I would love for you to tell me after, to go, I understand that he's important, but I just don't like his work. And there are a lot of people who are impacted vehemently. Yes, he's important. Yes, he was a bridge to this post-impressionist movement, but it's not pretty in some ways. And so he did sculptures, he did painting, he did printmaking. In fact, some of us probably know him best through his cutout paperwork that he does at the end of life, and we'll talk a bit about those. So he's born in 1869, so a little past the midpoint of the 19th century. It's the same time we're getting lots of new artists, and it's because if we look to France, there's just a lot going on. The economy is beginning to boom. There's a free flow of thoughts. People are moving into kind of a new generation of ideas. He's born in France. His father is a middle-class grain dealer. His mother is a housewife, but she is probably his earliest, most prominent impact on his art, because she comes to him at an early age and shows him her art. And continually, even through art school, when he's getting trained, she comes to him and is his art critic. So she not only supports, but she guides him in the way he does art. But like many of us, he may have a passion, but his father said no one makes money at art, so you need to have a career. And in his late teens, he begins to go to law school. He has some success at law school in Paris. He actually becomes a law clerk, where he works in a law firm. And then at the age of 20, he has an appendicitis. And so while he's a law clerk, he's starting his career, he's laid up in the hospital, and lo and behold, his mother comes, and while he's there for weeks recovering, to keep him busy, she brings art supplies. And she sits with him while he begins to paint. And he goes, I love this so much more than I love law. And she encourages him. Says, if that's what you want to do, then do it. So over the next 3 years, he leaves his law career, and in his mid-20s, he begins to pursue art.
In 1892, he applied to the École des Beaux-Arts, the best art school in France, but failed the entrance exam. So what he decided to do was to stand outside the École des Beaux-Arts every morning when the tutors arrived and accidentally, on purpose, bump into them with his drawings. He did this for a number of weeks, and eventually one of the tutors, an artist called Gustave Moreau, invited him into his classes, and he sat at the back. But in 1894, he applied to the École des Beaux-Arts again and again failed. He eventually succeeded in 1895 at the age of 26.
Okay, so now he's 26. He's gotten into arguably the best art school in at least Europe, if not the world, and he begins to study under this guy, William Adolphe Bouguereau, and Bouguereau is a classicist. He is, at the time, this is what art is supposed to be. He's a realist, and to be a realist means that when you paint, it's perfect. There's not a brush stroke that you can see. It is perfect if you look at the hands. The hands are ideal. If you look at their clothing, all of the wrinkles are perfectly realistic. And the art subject matter needs to really be classical. You want to do religious and classical scenes that are going to evoke a realistic response. So when you look at Bouguereau, what do you see? What strikes you when you see his paintings? Triangles. I was like, what's this? Triangles. Okay, you see triangles. Yeah, I like that. That's very good. What else do we see? Photograph. Yeah, it is realistic. It's as if somebody took a photograph of this. What do you see about emotion? Sad. That was a good guess. They weren't quite sure. Yeah, sad. Yeah, you mean she's begging. Her hand is out. So if you're saying that impressionists and post-impressionists give us emotion, that's true, but you can still get emotion here. That Bouguereau is giving us emotion, but he's giving us kind of that top level. It's we see it, we cognize it, and we have the appropriate emotional response. When we look at these post-impressionists, it's getting us in our gut, not in our brain. And so if you look at what Matisse does, Matisse begins to learn this style, but rebels. That there are these other painters who are out doing more avant-garde new stuff, and he wants to do the new stuff. And so Bouguereau doesn't like him at all and tries to get him kicked out of school. And by the way, Matisse doesn't like Bouguereau all that much either, and that's when he's able to then shift over to Gustave Moreau, who becomes his first real mentor. That we see here, it's this beginning of a new impressionist style. And by the way, impressionist, I was always taught that impressionists were called impressionists because, I don't know, they gave impressions of something. But it really is a derogatory slang word that was given to them when these impressionists first came up, that it's not a real painting. It's just an impression of what? It's a draft, basically. It's a sketch. Nothing more than a sketch. And so they wore that badge of honor that I'm an impressionist, which was really slang against them, but they wore that as who they were. And Moreau is beginning to pick that up. All of a sudden, you can see different brushstrokes. You can see light done in different ways. It's a little fuzzy, but you still understand what's there. And he does these biblical and mythological scenes that are really enticing. They're almost a bridge kind of between this and this, where they're not perfect, but they definitely have more realism than later Impressionism, and yet they begin to convey a different level of emotion. But the influences that Matisse really values beyond Moreau, are first his mother, who continually looks at his paintings and says, you have to add more emotion. They have to evoke a response. And so she's the one who says you need to be emotional about your art. And he begins to look at Van Gogh and Gauguin and Cezanne and say, these are the guys that I want to be like. And they're the young bucks who are beginning to make a move, so much so that he finds this Three Bathers of Cezanne. And he has a friend by the name of Villard who owns the painting and offers to sell it to him. And here we have Matisse, who is a broke student of art, but he goes, I love this painting so much, I have to have it. And Villard says, all right, for 1,200 francs, I will sell you this painting. You do a promissory note, pay me off as you can, and you can have it. And this painting might be the most influential work of art that Matisse has. He begins to look at the brush strokes. He begins to look at the symmetry, that triangle you're talking about, and how do figures come together. And so then he takes a stab at it. He's beginning to get some notoriety by 1907, 1908, and he does this kind of copy in a way called Bathers with a Turtle. Now, how many have been to Lisa and Simon's class on art and photography? All right, some of you guys. By the way, I think they're brilliant. They are just amazing in not only their lives, but in their idea of art. And as I've kind of attended a few of their classes, one of the things they say is that a picture should make you ask questions. That if you see a photograph, you should be going, why that? And if you're not, then it's too flat. You want to have perspective. So when you look at this, are there questions that it brings to mind? Yeah, what are they? Couldn't hear. A little louder. Why true? Oh, why a turtle? Yeah. I mean, the first big question I have is, A, why are they naked? But that's just a personal thing. But then I go very quickly to, why are they feeding a turtle? What is it about this turtle that makes three women come together to feed it? And then in the middle one, why is her entire hand in her mouth? I still am not quite sure on that one. But it definitely makes you ask questions. It looks at these colors. What is the green and the blue, do you think? Grass and water. I mean, I think they're classic colors for grass and water. He hasn't shifted that, but they definitely have no definition. It just gives you the feel of three women by a body of water feeding a turtle, as one does. So Cezanne, he begins to look at how Cezanne works. And Cezanne is very methodical and slow about how he paints, and he's not comfortable having nude models. So he tends to just paint by memory, whereas Matisse is willing to have nude models, but it's an interesting way that Matisse looks at Cezanne, so much so that later in life when he donated this, he says on the letter, A, I want you to put it in a prominent spot because this is a really important piece of art. But B, I've had this photo or this painting for 40 years, and I know it intimately, though not entirely. I think that's interesting, that after all this time that it was in his collection, he studied every aspect of it, but he still says there's more to learn that I haven't learned yet on this painting. So he begins to come up with his own art, and he goes to the Salon d'Automne, and he brings forward a few pieces of art that give the feel of post-impressionist art. The first is Woman with a Hat. How many like this painting? How many don't particularly like this painting? Yeah, all right, so more like it than not. This is actually done of his wife. So this is his wife who he's painted. She's wearing a fine French dress. She has gloves on. She has a fine hat. I don't know if those are apples or not in the hat, but she has stuff in the hat. Lots of colors. Would you say they are realistic? No, he's beginning to move away from realism, and while he looks at it, she's painted wearing nothing but a black dress. So all the color, he had her come in a black hat, black gloves, black dress, and then he brought the emotion to what she wore. Which is kind of cool that all of this woman in a hat is not in any way real. It is totally contrived by him. But he begins to cause a stir. Not everybody likes his work, but he begins to be a name that is talked about. So as he rises to prominence, he meets two other guys.
Remember that Matisse is a very conservative person. Yet in 1905 he meets two artists, André Derain and Maurice Vlaminck, both of whom were very bohemian characters. In fact, Matisse's family think they're nothing but drug addicts and drunkards.
Which is true.
Yet the three of them together create this new form of painting called fauvism, which is very extreme, very bright, very colourful. Matisse's paintings suddenly become very avant-garde, as you can see here.
So fauvism, or wild beasts, is what they're called. They go off by a lake and begin to paint, and they go to the south of France, and during the summers they lay outside, which is it's an impressionist idea that to get light right, you can't do it in a studio. You have to go out and experience it in the light, do your draft, and then they would come back in the fall to Paris and fine-tune. So you have this emergence of fauvism, sky blue, water blue, grass green. No, I mean, he now is totally breaking away from the norm, where he is saying that my colors don't necessarily have to match reality. I'm going to give you an emotion. What do we feel? Anything? Excited? All right, what else? Energy. All right, so there's energy to it. I wonder why there's so much blue. Is he trying to pull us down, or is he just putting blue on bridges to throw us off to say, hey, that's not the sky. I can use blue however I want. But he says, when I put down a green, it doesn't mean grass. When I put down blue, it doesn't mean sky. So he's beginning to make the point that I am in control of what you see and what you experience. It doesn't have to be really normal. And he catches the eye of Gertrude Stein. And Gertrude Stein is this, mega wealthy individual, she and her family, and it's everyone wants to be friends with them. Most dominantly, Picasso. Picasso is a great fan, and she's a great supporter. And she introduces Matisse to Picasso, and they become really good friends and really good frenemies. That it's this, a real competition between the two, but they tend to say that each is in a boxing match with the other. that by boxing we each get better. And so Fauvism is kind of a precursor into what goes into Cubism. And then what comes out, we see again in Matisse in his lines and his forms. Here is another one. Can anyone tell me what that is an early rendition of? Dancers. That Dancers, which he does a few years later, he first puts here. Is there a cultural influence in this one? What do you see? What type of art? All right, we'll see if you see it as I go through. He does like his nudes, by the way. But this is as I mentioned, they go to the south of France and they would draw these landscapes, and then they would come back to Paris in the fall and the winter and take the landscapes that they had done, copy them, and add some kind of content. And here it's influenced by Poisson and Japanese woodcrafts. So if you look at it, there's a tremendous amount of Asian influence in the characters. And he even has these Persian miniatures that he looks at and begins to put in. And this is not one scene, but multiple scenes. So here is one scene that he pulls and puts in. Here is another. Here is another. Here is another. And he takes unrelated scenes and puts them into one piece of art, creating a new homogeneous whole. So as he does it, it's really intriguing on how he takes differing ideas, and now he is totally devoid. We do have blue water kind of in the background, but it's yellow grass and red trees, and yet we still know they're trees, we still know they're ground, and they give us this kind of almost heat coming off the canvas between the yellows and the reds. So he moves and he looks at Eastern and African art. He paints his wife again, called the Portraits of Madame. It almost looks Japanese in the way he puts it together. And then he has this really wealthy Russian who comes to him and says, I want you to paint for my palace back in Russia. And this is before the fall, before the change in Russia when they were confiscated, but that's where we get dance and music. And when I see these, there we go. If you look at both, we have red, blue, green. And he says that they're really to look at mankind, sky and ground, or heaven and earth. In each, he likes this idea. He's moved away from threes, and he's moving into kind of this odd rule of five. That 5 different figures on a canvas gives you that kind of motion and impression that he's looking for, and we continue to have rhythmic energy, which you guys mentioned. I mean, it's something that he pulls out of his art. Ultimately, at the Armory Show of 1913 in New York is when he has that last breakthrough, and now he is a name. In New York, at this Armory Show, 2/3 of the art that's displayed are from the United States. But it's the art that came over from Europe that became all the buzz. It was the art you see down in the lower left-hand corner from Van Gogh, Gauguin, Cézanne, Pissarro, and Matisse and Duchamp. That it's their post-impressionist art, that this is the moment in the United States that modern art emerges. That when everyone sees it, they point back to the Armory Show and say, that's when America starts modern art. And here he has the blue nude. I think this one's really intriguing. How many like it? How many don't like it? More. All right, so more people don't like this than the other one I asked. And it's intriguing. This is what Picasso has to say about it. Picasso says that Matisse could either paint a nude or do a design, but he can't do both. All right, maybe. But then we get this from Carl Sandburg. Carl Sandburg starts off by saying, I hate this. I absolutely hate this piece of art until I realized what it was. Then it became one of my most favorite pieces of art. And what he says is what's awkward and what just strikes us in our belly is this is a guy. It's not a woman. It's got breasts, I get that, but it is a man's thigh, man's calves, man's feet, man's chest, man's arms, and probably even man's head with a woman's breasts. And he goes, so Sandberg goes, now I get it. What I don't like about it is this juxtaposition or this tension between femininity and masculinity. And now that I know what he was doing, I love this painting. I still don't like it, but it is awkward. You look at it and it just doesn't look right. But that's what he's going for. This is intentional. That he is beginning to say we can experiment not just with color, not just with brushstrokes. We can take gender to a new level, and he takes it even further. Now, I showed you the dance that actually went to Russia. Here are some of the things that critics said. Nightmare of vulgarity. I like that one. Barbaric and monstrous. Insult to the dignity of human figures. There you go. That's a good one. And a violent mess. So the critics are talking about him, but they're saying things that are difficult. And then he goes to this red studio, and he begins to say, only art matters. So he's done his studio, it's in red. He's done his table, it's in red. He's done his bureau, it's in red. Anything that is not art is just red. It has an outline. It's kind of flat, but we were able to see what it looks like, but it's only the art that matters. And I love that because he is really trying to make a statement about art. And he has these themes of light and space and abstraction that he pulls through all of these works. So as he is becoming famous, he's also becoming jaded. I mean, the critics continue to harass him. He's beginning to sell. He's beginning to make some money. But now, like many of us, he's turned 60. And it's like, is it worth it? Is it not? And I need to get away from the art critics. I need to get away from Europe. And so in 1930, he goes to Tahiti, kind of like Gauguin did decades before. He goes to see something in the raw, something that is natural, not that contrived society of Europe, but what can I do for my painting that breaches culture? I mean, one of the things, we're going to see so many beautiful places, but often what changes us is the cultures that we encounter. That as we go to Bali, we're going to be impacted. As we go to Australia, we come back changed. And he was hoping to do that in his art. So in 1930, 4 years before that, he had an operation, and he was having a hard time recovering. So his kind of cover story is, I'm going to go to the islands and recoup. I'm going to get my health back. And so at essentially our age, he moves to Tahiti, and he loves it. He doesn't stay all that long, but he begins to paint, and this is one of his first paintings. What do you think of this one? We like it? What strikes us? It's like a what? Postage stamp. It is exactly like a postage stamp. And he has this beautiful triangulation. Going back to your triangle, see? I'm getting it now. If you look at the ship, we have triangles off the lines. If you look at the diagonal coming off the curtain, it is like he is saying, I'm a European in my hotel room, and I'm looking out on the indigenous culture of Tahiti. So he's beginning to feel that he has to break through his barrier of a window and interact with culture. So he's looking at how to manage the interior space and create a postage stamp. He then comes up with this. What do we think? Like? Don't like? About half and half. All right, most likes. It's an interesting piece. He's using different colors than he's used before. He's using these broad strokes. What do you think he's painting? Forests. Coconut grove. I think it's a coconut grove. I think it's palm trees. But maybe forest. I'm just saying he's in Tahiti. They don't have much forest. But it's looking, he's beginning to bring in, and he begins to write about the local culture and how it's not just about him anymore. That he is going to adopt and be influenced by, assimilate their culture into his painting, their customs, their traditions into his art. It really is a cultural exchange. It's that he is going to accept what he feels and accept what he sees. He sees Polynesian art, particularly these bold patterns. And this is where he is changed. He's simplifying. He is saying, my art doesn't have to be as extravagant. I'm going to bring it down to one image. I'm going to bring it down to simplified strokes. And that is something that follows him and is one of his biggest contributions to art. It alters his approach to the composition and the color, emphasizing emotional responses, emotional interaction that we see. He does this. This is another one of the ones that I personally love. The Tahitian series that he does, the sweeping lines are beautiful, I think. He's got this movement of a Tahitian figure, a sense of harmony and tranquility. At least that's what I get out of this. It's a congruent, beautiful figure. And while it may be kind of tied up, it's not tied up in angst. It's more tied up in nurturing and loving. And I think that this is the kind of thing that he moves on, trying to use these free-flowing lines, nothing straight anymore. Everything is going to have a curve. So if we look at his influence, he gets back and he paints this. Clearly not a Tahitian, but the lines, the flow is that same idea. And she is a lovely character, Lydia Delacchereskaya. Something like that. She was his nursemaid, a wonderful woman. And when she writes in her memoir, she says, I really appreciated he never painted me nude. She didn't say she was never nude. He never painted me nude. And yet his wife thinks they're having an affair, divorces him, he fires her, the wife leaves, he hires her back, and she stays with him through most of the rest of his life. But the art, this idea of free-flowing, nothing straight, everything curved in harmony with rich colors that may represent reality but also may not. This is what we think of often when we think of Matisse. We think of these cutouts where he brings the Tahitian birds and fish and seaweed and coral all into a background on either paper or paint where we have a Polynesian theme of items put together. We see themes in nature, deepened his appreciation for the relationship between humanity and nature. And I think that's true. It's cross-culturally, he grew. It wasn't just mimicking Asian, it's I understand Polynesian. And I understand their harmony and their idea of spirituality. And I'm going to bring that to bear in my art. At least he's hoping you'll feel that. He emphasized beauty of the landscape and the interconnected it to life. If you think about some of the lectures that others have done on the Polynesian culture and Polynesian religion, you begin to see that flow that he brings in. It reflects the grace and simplicity seen in Polynesian culture, minimizing, constantly trying to minimize his art. He then does this, which is a Romanian blouse, is the loose translation, but it's the idea still of roundness of her sleeves and of her face and of her arms, moving into the roundness of her dress. And these beautiful colors that he puts in and tries to bring the idea of a Romanian culture into the art. So simplicity, color, relaxed. Similar here to Asia. Now we're going back to an Asian culture, but we get to see a rough, simple form. How many like this one? And how many don't? All right, that's about 70%. I'm still in the I don't like that one. But it's an important piece of art where he has this Asian idea of what it would look like just to rest and relax. So if we look at his legacy, we get back to nudes, it really goes back to that three bathing beauties that he does, that there is this idea of water behind and land, but they're loosely put together. And you have these free bathers who are there. I mean, we might be bothered by their nudity, but they're not, that they're just relaxing in the sun. And so these ideas of how it's put together. Also look at the outline. It's not a thin outline. It's almost a chalkish outline on the way the figures are put together. So it's these broad colors with the thick contour lines. Same here. We're going back to odd colors, but it's an idea of evoking a sense of a little anxiety in us by looking at the yellows and the reds put together, that there's an exploration of form and color. And later, Picasso says, Matisse really impacted me. I didn't always like the guy, but he impacted my art and he pushed me forward. Marc Chagall, I am a huge fan. If I were to pick my top 20 paintings, maybe 5 of them are Chagall. Has anyone seen his churches on the Viking trips or on any trip? A few of you guys. If you ever get to Germany, I don't remember where his second church is, but he does these beautiful churches where you walk in and you're just bathed in blue and yellow light. And you look up and see these classic Chagall scenes. But he looks back and says, you know, Matisse moved me in new ways. And Jackson Pollock even says, Matisse is one of my major influences. So contemporary artists seeking to challenge traditional barriers in simplicity, in art, in contour, and in context is something that he gives. Even this Arab coffee house, as you look at it, at first you go, this is just a pale kind of picture. But what he's trying to represent with this Moroccan coffee house is that these guys are having coffee looking at a fish. Why? I don't know. But you've got guys in the back. It's almost mosque-like, where they're sitting back and relaxing and having coffee. So we get these non-Western art forms. He's trying to say you don't have to be European. We don't have to just do French scenes. We as Frenchmen can reach out cross-culturally and bring different influences into our art. He explores and appreciates diverse artistic traditions, and there's an ongoing dialogue about what art should be.
Paul Matisse, an artist himself, a sound sculptor, remembers his grandfather as driven to work, no matter what the personal cost.
There were all sorts of issues, and he wasn't a cozy person, but mostly it was his intensity that drove what happened around him.
A man who had to create, even though from 1940 on until his death in 1954 at the age of 84, Matisse was practically housebound as a result of a succession of near-fatal illnesses. So, with shapes cut out of painted paper, he conjured up the world on his walls, even a swimming pool. In the blue nudes, it's possible to see that his cutouts were anything but simple or childlike. They were carefully reworked and rethought.
So he calls the cutouts drawing with scissors, or he describes carving into color that's like sculpture.
Matisse considered this chapel in the south of France his masterpiece. From the stained glass windows to the priest's vestments, the designs were based on cutouts. After surviving poor health and the horrors of World War II, scissoring away, Matisse experienced what he considered a whole new life. His cutouts exploded in size and exuberance. He compared cutting to flying.
He did not go back to painting. He had discovered a new world, and he was just going to explore it.
Paul Matisse had seen some of his grandfather's cutouts as works in progress, pinned up on walls, but never so many together. They are a marvel, even to him.
I think he was just having the time of his life at this last period.
One of the giants of 20th century art, Matisse said, an artist should never be a prisoner of himself, prisoner of style, prisoner of reputation, prisoner of success. With his cutouts, he set himself free one last time.
Which I think is amazing as to how he does that. And as you look at his cutouts, so many of them are based upon the work that he did in Tahiti. The blue nudes are heavily Tahitian influenced. And then if we look at, if we look at how he impacted the world, he brings this idea of minimalism. He brings the idea of color changes. He brings the idea that you can represent something without being exact. And the way we do lines and the way we think about culture can impact and make a lasting influence in our art. So over 45 minutes, an entire semester, by the way, in just 45 minutes, his beginnings in law, his classical training, Fauvism, which brings us this picture on the right, I think is an incredible movement that he was involved in, his rise to prominence, his use of color and brush, late innovations in paper, and his lasting influences. Okay, go have dinner. Thank you for coming tonight.